So, continuing with a string of commissions, started last month for some 70s and 80s films. Last month it was Airport, which I had at least heard of. This one appears to have been lost to time, and if we could lose it again, that'd be just super great. The Hospital. Oh boy. So if you were to look up anything about this and get even a general descriptor of the movie, okay, it's frequently described as a satire and a black comedy. I'm going to disagree with both of those. Or at the very least, I'm going to fully disagree that it succeeds in any way at either. And it's not just because it's not funny. It's not. One of the most frequent thoughts that I had watching this was that a joke? I honestly didn't know. But it was marketed as a comedy. This was one of the posters. Yeah, let's go back to the other one. Oh boy. God. All right. So plot-wise, we follow George C. Scott, an actor who I like and who is good for the kind of part he's playing. He manages a hospital, and it's more or less a day in a very off the wall day, but a day in his life there trying to do that. So the stuff that goes on is too absurd to be taken seriously. Not absurdist enough to really qualify as a proper absurdist comedy. And the movie plays it straight, not in a deadpan humor way, but in a I'm not sure any of the people actually on set realized this was supposed to be funny, or the director told them not to play anything as a joke. It's painful trying to get through this. I know what it's trying to be. It's trying to be MASH, the movie, not the show. That's what it wants to be. But it is not pulling that off at all. A big part of why MASH succeeds at all, if it does succeed for you and it hasn't aged great, is there is a lot of charm to the performers in it. That helps a lot. There's no charm in this. And it's not because the performers are incapable of being charming. It's because there's no charm to the characters. George C. Scott, okay. I don't have a delicate way that I can say this. It's an early plot point that he and his wife have split. He's currently living in a hotel. He is impotent. When questioned about that by a shrink who he sees briefly, asks, how has that been going on a while? And he basically says, I don't know. It's been a long time since I've even bothered trying. I don't know how bad it is, really. I gave up. And as a plot point, fine. But I was a little nervous given that it's the 70s and you've got an impotent man who is, clearly bothered by that. I'm like, I have a suspicion about how that's going to resolve. And, before it gets to the part I was expecting, he has what basically amounts to an incel rant. It would have been 100% at home in some of the most toxic incel forums circa 2014. It's real bad. It's really bad. I cannot remember what his exact words were, but he has one point where he effectively says, there is no more oppressed group than the impotent man. And I'm just like, oh, God. And he's ranting this at a woman who he then proceeds to force himself onto. And the movie the movie half tries to get away with it, but then like doubles back and goes, oh no, actually it was that, because like it does that thing in the scene where like it's very clear he's being very forceful and he has not asked for consent and he's holding her down, but there's also a shot of her like smiling to imply she's into it. It's Diana Rigg, by the way, which like she is also capable of being incredibly charming. It doesn't help this movie. So like it does that soft pedal back where like maybe it wasn't the bad, but later on he himself openly admits that he raped her. His word. I wouldn't use that word normally in a review, but it's the word he uses for what he did. This is followed by I love yous between them, by the way. If any of this is meant to be funny, it's not. But again, it's not played as a joke. Like, so, okay. If this had the tone of a farce and you scrap the sexual assault, it could have maybe worked because like it opens with the accidental death of a doctor and with everything else going on, which includes, the general pile up and, annoyance from, the woman who collects insurance information getting in everybody's way. And there's like this one surgeon who's really terrible and has all these, side hustles that he's constantly running and he really shouldn't be allowed to be a surgeon at all. And there's protests going on because the hospital is taking over a neighboring building, which is tenement housing that they intend to demolish and replace with a new building that's going to be a drug center. And there's protests regard to all that. So like it's layering all these things in, and in the chaos, more hospital staff continue to die in a way that makes it look initially, I am going to spoil this movie, I don't care, that makes it look initially like it is the hospital's own incompetence that is killing its own staff. Except, with about 20 minutes left to go, it decides that this whole thing has actually been a murder mystery and there's a serial killer in the hospital. Again, played very straight. And actually, I want to circle back to the protesters. So you have a group of mostly black men, but a mixed group, protesting the upcoming demolishment of this tenement building. I'm not super comfortable with the way that that they are depicted because, here's the thing. This is one of those movies where nobody's good. Nobody's a good person. There's literally nobody to root for and nobody to care about. And the protesters immediately devolve into, like, okay, this whole movie has a very conservative tone to it. Because the protesters, they just immediately start infighting and using all these overly academic terms. It is exactly the way that I have always seen conservatives attempt to mock protesters, but I have never actually heard a protester speak like this. It's that. It's just that all over the place whenever they show up. I don't know what parts the movie thinks are the jokes. And the parts that I am sure are jokes are real bad. So like the thing with the protesters, that's definitely a joke. There's this thing with this guy. This is Diana Rigg's father is in the hospital. He later turns out to be the killer, by the way. Whatever. Supposedly he's comatose, and she brings in a I don't know what the right term would be. Shaman, medicine man, a indigenous person to basically do like a little ceremony over him. And like they just show this, with him, topless and chanting and like shaking some stuff. And like it goes on for so long. I guess the movie thinks that's inherently funny, that it's just happening. But like it's not absurd enough to actually be funny in and of itself. And it's not presented as a joke. It's just presented, but with such a lengthy thing that it's like it's holding for applause. The one thing, this was actually slightly surprising, given that this was made in the early 70s. They did actually get an actual native person to play that part. So tiny, minuscule fraction of props for that, I guess, given what I was expecting, because I was fully expecting that it was just that they just got somebody with dark skin from who knows where and just kind of did that all purpose. We'll have Hispanic people play, people from the Middle East. We'll have Italians play indigenous characters. Fine. I thought it was going to be that. It wasn't. Like, mildly surprised, because again, the tone of this thing just I struggle to think of a less funny comedy. Like, black comedy, not just dark comedy, but black comedy is one of the hardest things to pull off. And I have seen way more black comedy failures than I have seen black comedy successes. It is insanely hard to balance it in a way that doesn't just come across as cynical, cruel, tone deaf, or confused. This one's mostly that last one, but it's a little bit of all of them. Black comedy, like, I guess to give some examples where it's worked, Four Lions is a black comedy, and it's very successful. But it neither shies away from its jokes nor its darkness. This kind of shies away from both. The jokes aren't proper jokes, and the darkness isn't even played up in contrast to the jokes. Like, the reason I cite something like Four Lions is that the humor is so pronounced until suddenly it is not funny at all. And those moments frankly unnerved me in a way that I think was intentional, but even if it wasn't, is very effective. Whereas this, it's just laughing at stuff that, like, why do you think that's funny? And, you can't even get catharsis of stuff like the horrible surgeon I mentioned, getting his comeuppance towards the end. Because, like, okay, I'm not saying the guy isn't worth rooting against, but who the hell am I rooting for? Who am I in favor of? Because, like, yeah, he's bad. He's not that much worse than literally everybody else in the movie. I cannot, in good conscience, recommend this to anybody other than people who want to just autopsy a failure. This fails at just about every level, while still at the nuts and bolts being competent. Because it's not, when you get something that's like so bad it's funny, you're generally dealing with flat out incompetence, incompetent camera work, editing, acting, directing, script, what have you. None of this is incompetent. It's just bad. And just bad without that sort of obliviousness that can result in something like Plan 9 from Outer Space. This can't be fun, even ironically. It's just a bad movie that is trying very clearly to ape MASH in a non-war setting, and it doesn't work. Like, I don't think they realized how much the war setting was central to MASH working at all. And because like inherently with that movie and also with the show later on, that contrast of the way these doctors acted compared to the situation they were in, that was the comedy. This is all contrived situations or exaggerated situations or situations that, like, just come out of nowhere, and the contrast isn't there. Plus, these people aren't fun, and they're not funny. And they're not taking things lightly. It's not like they're acting unperturbed as all the nonsense goes down. No, they get upset, they get frustrated, they get worried. So they're acting like semi-reasonable human beings despite all being terrible. So where is the humor? What about this is supposed to be funny? The exaggerations are too small for it to work as satire or black comedy or absurdism. It is none of those things. This f***ing sucks. Don't watch it. If you have, I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. Apparently Roger Ebert liked it, as if I couldn't have a more mixed view on his taste. But failing that, what's a supposed black comedy you've seen that friggin' sucks? Feeling Minnesota, that's one that I remember from actually quite young in my life. Has always stuck with me how much that sucked. But whatever your thoughts are, drop something down in the comments. Let's talk about it. Patreon pays the bills. And it enables me to do this as my living. Even if you can't help me out that way, like, share, subscribe. They all help me out. Gross Point Blank. That's another good black comedy. So there you go. There's two comparisons for you. That one's not disturbing, but that is pretty black. But anyways, whatever. Don't worry about it. Try and take a relaxed attitude around here. So just come on back next time you need a break. And now to thank my highest supporting Patreon supporters. Robin Moore, Zubin Lutfula, Goddess Elida, Welsh Wrestling Geeks, Oliver B., Melissa Pedersen, Movie Turtle, Ulrich Bogdan, Melinda Walters, Auntie Kate 808, Andre, Becky Sparks, Claire Wright, Renabulax the Poodle, Tracy Scrabbit, Angry Casperl, Dave Hall, Quite Bearish, Rosalind Bennett, Adam RDL Taylor, Palbo Rabajagal, Mary Mello, Mira G, and Sir Didymus is my favorite. If you want to see me try and read your name while dealing with these little pains in my butt, check out the rewards on my Patreon and see if there's any that you like.